Hey, what's up guys? It's Sev from Workbench, and this week we're going to look at the Shader Effector. Today I'm going to show you how to create this light effect in Cinema using MoGraph. Let's get started. So a few weeks ago, I created this little computer with this little light calculation thing. I do this sort of thing all the time, but for some reason, every time I do it, I can never remember how to do it. It's a fairly simple process. Let me start with a new scene. So we're going to start with a cloner, set to grid array, and I'm just cloning a box. Then I'm going to add a shader effector. I'm going to turn off all the transforms, turn on color, and then use alpha strength. And then in shading, I'm going to create a noise, and then let's use this one. I'm going to change it to layer, and then inside layer, I'm going to add a colorizer. So that would be effects colorizer, not shader colorizer. I created a couple colors. So you can see it instantly works. Of course, if you want it to move, in the noise, you need to add some animation. So add some animation speed, change the loop period, and if you hit play, you can see it cycling. Now, to render this out, it's fairly simple. I created a shader with only luminance turned on. In the texture tab, I created a layer, and in the layer, I'm using subsurface scattering. Inside the SSS, I'm using a color shader so that I can use the shading from the shader effector. And then I'm not using very much in here. I'm just adding a little smoothing. And then I did another cloner with some lights underneath it to give you this effect. The cool thing about it is that because I'm using the same cloner setup, the lights in the cloner are changing color with the shader effector. So that's it. That's the basic setup. Let me show you how the computers work. Now the only difference on these computers was I was using Redshift, so the color setup's a little different, but the basic setup is the same. So I've got a cloner here, set to grid array, set to iterate, and I'm using a shader effector to bounce the lights around. You can see it's animated. I did the same setup that I just showed you. Added a colorizer to it, and in the noise, I'm animating the noise 11, loop period is 72, and I was sticking to a color palette. That's why you can see that I've only got a few colors in here, and I'm mapping them through here. Also, if you notice, I'm removing the first two clones on each row. How I'm doing that is I'm creating a MoGraph selection, and then I'm using a plane effector set to absolute, and I'm setting the scale to 0. Then in my second setup, it's the same as the previous setup. However, I selected everything except for the first two clones on each row, and then I'm using a plane effector to hide those. Also on this one, on the shader effector in the noise, I'm using a green colorizer, just a couple of shades of green. And you can see this is what it looks like. It's a pretty simple setup, but it's really pretty convincing. If you have any questions or comments, leave in the comments down below. If you'd like to help support what we do, go to patreon.com/workbench and check out the blog at workbench.tv. As always, I'm Sev. We'll see you next week.